We were never friends. We never spoke to each other, only on the set.
Everyone remembers the laughter, the catchphrase, and the swagger, Dyn-o-mite, but almost no one knows the man behind the legend, James Carter Walker. Jr., known as Jimmie Walker, was more than just a sitcom star. He was a symbol of hope, humor, and hustle in a world that didn't always play fair. Yet behind the cameras, there were whispers, hidden deals, and one secret that could have changed everything. How did a simple TV role turn into a lifelong mystery? And what was Jimmie hiding all those years? Join us as we uncover more. Early life and rise to fame. Before Hollywood knew his name, before Dyn-o-mite echoed across living rooms in the 1970s, there was just a young man from the Bronx trying to make people laugh to survive. His name? James Carter Walker. Jr., better known as Jimmie Walker, the face of joy and energy on the hit sitcom Good Times. Born on June 25, 1947, in the bustling streets of New York City, Jimmie grew up during a time when the odds were stacked against young black dreamers. But that was just the beginning. Growing up in the 1950s, he wasn't born into privilege, far from it. His neighborhood was alive with the sound of street games, music, and the endless chatter of people hustling to make ends meet. His mother, Lorena, was a hardworking woman with a strong will, and his father, James Sr., pushed him to stay out of trouble and dream bigger than the block he lived on. In school, Jimmie wasn't the best student. He's admitted that openly, but he was the funniest. He could make anyone laugh, even teachers. Humor became his superpower, his way of navigating a world that didn't always make room for kids like him. After high school, he took odd jobs, one of them with the New York State Urban League, another as a radio engineer at WRVR. But comedy kept calling. He started performing at small clubs around New York City, places like the Improv and the Bitter End, often waiting hours just to get 5 minutes on stage. The audiences were tough. Some nights, the laughs didn't come at all. But when they did, Jimmie lit up the room. His energy was contagious, his delivery sharp. And soon, word began to spread. This kid from the Bronx had something special. But the road wasn't smooth. There were rejections. There were nights when he barely made enough for a taxi home. There were gigs that ended in silence. And yes, there was the harsh sting of racial discrimination in an entertainment industry still dominated by stereotypes. Yet through it all, Jimmie refused to quit. A turning point came when a local comedy promoter introduced him to fellow up-and-comers like Richard Pryor and David Brenner. Seeing how raw and fearless they were changed him. He started refining his act, sharp social observations, big facial expressions, and an energy that made people remember his name.
That's what you said a half hour ago, Junior.
Oh, don't worry, Dad, I got it covered.
Now, Junior!
And just as things were beginning to shift in his favor, disaster almost struck, right when Hollywood was finally starting to notice him. One shocking misstep nearly ended his rise before it even began. That near disaster would have ended most careers before they even started. But for Jimmie Walker, it only fueled his determination. The misstep, a botched comedy gig, where he bombed in front of a major television scout, could have shut every door. But instead, his resilience stood out. He came back to that same stage the following week, sharper, calmer, and funnier. The scout, impressed by his courage, recommended him to producers looking for new comedic talent. That connection would soon lead him to the audition that changed his life forever. It was the early 1970s when television icon Norman Lear and producer Eric Monti were working on a new sitcom about a struggling African-American family in Chicago. The show was to be real, funny, and unapologetically honest about life in the projects. They needed someone to play the oldest son, a tall, wiry, lovable dreamer with big energy and even bigger ideas. When Jimmie Walker walked into that audition room, everything about him screamed charisma. His grin, his rhythm, his confidence, even his awkward charm caught their attention immediately. During the audition, Jimmie didn't just read his lines. He performed them, pacing around, adding his own spin, throwing in physical gestures that made the producers laugh uncontrollably. According to crew members, Norman Lear turned to his team and said, "That's our JJ." From that moment, Jimmie Walker became James J.J. Evans Jr. When Good Times premiered on February 8, 1974, no one expected it to explode like it did. The show, spun off from Maude, was the first sitcom centered on a black, two-parent family living in public housing. It struck a chord with millions of viewers, and right in the middle of it all was JJ, loud, confident, hilarious, unpredictable, and bursting with youthful optimism. The magic moment came when Jimmy improvised a single line during filming. In the middle of a joke, he yelled, "Dyn-o-mite!" a phrase he had been using casually in his stand-up routine. The crew erupted with laughter. The audience went wild. Producers loved it so much they wrote it into the script, and soon it became JJ's trademark catchphrase. Within months, Dyn-o-mite was echoing through households across America. Kids mimicked it at school. Comedians referenced it in their sets. Even news anchors quoted it on air. Jimmie Walker had become a phenomenon. Overnight, he was a superstar. His face on magazine covers, his name in headlines, his image plastered on t-shirts and posters. He made guest appearances on talk shows and performed at packed comedy clubs between filming schedules. The fame brought money, opportunities, and public adoration. J.J. Evans wasn't just a TV character anymore. He was a symbol of laughter and resilience in hard times. But fame is rarely as bright as it looks. With the spotlight came pressure. Jimmy was suddenly carrying the weight of representing an entire community on his shoulders. Critics argued that J.J.'s over-the-top antics reinforced stereotypes, while others defended him as a breath of fresh air and a comedic genius. The debates grew louder as the show gained popularity. Behind the scenes, tension began to rise. Some cast members, including John Amos and Esther Rolle, reportedly expressed frustration that the show was shifting its focus away from family issues toward JJ's comedic antics. They wanted balance, while the producers wanted ratings. Jimmy, caught in the middle, felt the strain. He admired his co-stars and respected their views, but he couldn't control how the network marketed the show. As the seasons went on, Jimmy struggled to balance his identity as both an actor and a comedian. He wanted to be taken seriously, but the world only saw JJ everywhere he went.
Hi, JJ. How you doing?
Not bad.
Good.
People shouted his catchphrase, expecting laughter on command. What had started as joy began to feel like a cage. The more he tried to evolve beyond his character, the more Hollywood tried to keep him inside it. There were also the grueling work hours, the expectations to stay funny even when he wasn't feeling it, and the unspoken rule that he had to remain the energetic spark that held the show together. The fame that had lifted him up was slowly wearing him down, and then came the revelation that changed everything. Cracks and struggles behind the scenes. At first glance, Good Times looked like the perfect success story, a hit show with millions of viewers and a cast that brought laughter into every home. But behind the curtain, things were far more complicated. What the audience saw each week was only part of the story. The set, while full of laughter on screen, often carried tension once the cameras stopped rolling. Jimmie Walker had become the breakout star, but his rising fame created ripples across the production.
Just help us through all this oatmeal, and we promise we'll never ask for anything else again.
The character of J.J. Evans had taken center stage, and not everyone was happy about it. John Amos and Esther Rolle, who played his parents, believed the show was drifting away from its original purpose of portraying the dignity and struggles of a working-class black family. They worried it was turning into a platform for slapstick humor, where Jimmy's character got the laughs while deeper family themes were sidelined. It got worse. According to several reports from cast and crew members, heated discussions became frequent. Esther Rolle once expressed her frustration publicly, saying she loved Jimmy but hated what the writers were turning his character into. She wanted the show to reflect truth and balance, not just catchphrases. Jimmy, meanwhile, felt torn. He was grateful for the opportunity.
God didn't make man to steal.
Then how come he gave us more pockets than hands?
Yet trapped between loyalty to his colleagues and loyalty to his own success. There were also creative conflicts with producers. Network executives pushed for more JAJ-centered episodes, believing his popularity was the key to keeping ratings high. Writers were told to include Dyn-o-mite in almost every script. What had once been spontaneous began to feel forced, and Jimmie could sense it. The pressure to stay funny at all times grew unbearable. Every laugh had to be bigger than the last, every episode more outrageous. Off-camera, the strain of fame began to take its toll. Jimmie was working long hours, juggling tapings, public appearances, and touring schedules. Sleep was rare. Privacy was almost non-existent. Fans expected JJ to be everywhere, smiling, joking, performing, but the man behind the character was exhausted. Interviews from that time hinted at growing isolation.
Marvelous. I'm reading the paper. I'm checking out Jimmy Carter. It's wonderful. A lot of people are irritated at Jimmy Carter.
He once admitted that fame can make you feel lonelier than ever, surrounded by people who only see the character, not the person. There were whispers, too, about salary disputes. Despite his fame, Jimmie reportedly earned far less than his white counterparts on other popular sitcoms. Negotiations with the network were difficult. He wanted fair compensation for the ratings he was helping deliver, but every time he pushed, resistance followed. Rumors circulated that his contract contained restrictive clauses that limited his outside opportunities. He could not take certain roles or endorsements without network approval. And then came the financial pressures that often follow sudden fame. Like many young stars of that era, Jimmie wasn't prepared for the flood of money or the tax realities that came with it. He was supporting family, friends, and a growing circle of people who depended on him. The success that had once seemed like a dream now felt like a heavy responsibility. Every new paycheck came with new obligations, and it became harder to keep track of where it all went. His personal life wasn't immune either. Though Jimmie kept his romantic relationships mostly private, tabloids occasionally hinted at flings, heartbreaks, and failed commitments. The truth, according to those close to him, was that his work schedule and public attention made it nearly impossible to build something lasting. He lived in the spotlight, but emotionally, he was alone. Mental and emotional fatigue began creeping in. The fame that had once energized him was now draining him. Cast departures didn't help. When John Amos left the show in 1976, and later Esther Roll in 1977, the dynamic changed. The family unity that Good Times was built on began to fade, and with it, Jimmie's sense of purpose. The scripts grew weaker, the laughter felt forced, and the criticism from both fans and the press grew louder. Still, Jimmie tried to keep things together. He stayed professional, he showed up for work, and he gave every line his all. But cracks were forming beneath the surface, cracks that no one outside the set could see. And then, one night, everything changed. On a cold Hollywood night, he received a phone call that would change everything, but no one ever knew it happened. That mysterious phone call, on that cold Hollywood night, marked the beginning of a darker chapter in Jimmie Walker's life, one that only a handful of people ever truly understood. To the world, he was still the quick-witted, fun-loving comedian with an infectious smile, but behind closed doors, his world was shifting in ways that would shock even those closest to him. It started quietly, almost unnoticed. After Good Times peaked, Jimmie began to explore opportunities beyond the sitcom. He dabbled in business deals, comedy tours, and private investments that promised big returns. Some went well, others didn't. Friends recall that he became increasingly private about his finances and wary of who he trusted. In an industry full of opportunists, he'd seen too many fellow entertainers lose everything to bad management or misplaced faith in the wrong people. He vowed never to let that happen to him. Yet the decisions he made to protect himself would later lead to even greater suspicion. Then came the whispers. Insiders claimed he had habits that surprised those who knew him as the clean-cut TV star. Some said he spent long nights alone in his office, poring over paperwork, rarely sleeping. Others described him as deeply cautious, even paranoid, about contracts and money matters. A few suggested he had quietly distanced himself from certain industry circles, especially after Good Times ended. He no longer trusted Hollywood, believing it had used him, celebrated him, and then discarded him the moment ratings slipped. There were also murmurs of strained relationships. People who once worked closely with him said that fame had changed him, that he had become more guarded, more skeptical, less willing to let people in. Romantic ties came and went, friendships fizzled out, and though he still smiled for the cameras, those who met him privately described a man carrying invisible weight. On the outside, the public saw confidence and success. Jimmie appeared on talk shows, continued performing stand-up, and maintained his trademark humor. But what the public didn't see were the sleepless nights, the regrets over decisions made during his television peak, and the lingering battles with studios that still owned rights to his image and catchphrases. Then came the rumors of health struggles. Though Jimmie rarely spoke about it publicly, several reports suggested that years of stress and erratic schedules took a toll on his health. A close friend once said he worked himself to exhaustion, always afraid that if he stopped, the world would forget him. Fame had become both a blessing and a chain. And that brings us to the most intriguing part. Somewhere along the way, while cleaning out old files or revisiting old deals,
Now, come on, Florida, no more, please. I want you to see how we're getting by.
Dad's doing the spring cleaning a little early this year.
Jimmie stumbled upon something unexpected. No one knows exactly what that document contained, but its discovery reportedly changed how Jimmie viewed his entire career. Some said it revealed that he had unknowingly signed away certain creative rights during the height of good times. Others whispered that it hinted at deeper financial manipulation, money that had gone missing, payments that never reached him, and names on the paper that shocked him. The discovery shook him deeply. For weeks, he withdrew from public life. Old friends noticed the shift. His usually vibrant energy seemed dimmer, his interviews shorter, his jokes less spontaneous. It was as if he had uncovered a truth too heavy to carry. Yet, he chose silence. He never publicly addressed it, never confirmed or denied the stories. Whatever was in that document stayed locked away both literally and figuratively. The secret that almost ended everything. The discovery of that hidden document would become the turning point in Jimmie Walker's story, the moment when everything he thought he knew about his fame and fortune began to unravel. For years, he had lived with the assumption that his rise to stardom was clean, fair, and built purely on talent and hard work. But what he found buried in those old files painted a very different picture, one that blurred the line between success and exploitation. You won't believe what it was. According to insiders who later spoke off the record, the document wasn't just a contract. It was a series of papers, old agreements, and royalty statements tied to Good Times and its spin-off merchandise. There were notes about residuals, character rights, and image licensing that no one had ever explained to him back in the 1970s. Jimmie realized that much of his likeness, his voice, even his catchphrase, Dyn-o-mite, had been trademarked and monetized without his full awareness.
That's what you said a half hour ago, Junior.
Oh, don't worry, Dad, I got it covered.
Now, Junior!
At the time Good Times was airing, television actors of color often had limited leverage. Contracts were strict, pay was modest, and young stars were rarely represented by top-tier agents. Jimmie, fresh from the comedy circuit, didn't have the legal sophistication to understand every clause buried in the fine print. What that meant was simple but devastating. He had become the face of a billion-dollar cultural phenomenon, but he was only earning a fraction of what the network and advertisers were making from his image. The document confirmed his worst fear. Someone else had owned JJ all along. That realization hit him hard. The laughter, the fame, the applause, it all suddenly felt hollow. Every t-shirt sold with his face, every lunchbox stamped with Dyn-o-mite, every rerun broadcast across the world had been profiting someone else. And worse, there was little he could legally do about it. The statute of limitations on most of the contracts had expired, and challenging them would have required a lawsuit against one of the most powerful networks in the business. Jimmie confided in a few close friends about what he'd found. Some urged him to go public, to expose the exploitation, to speak out for other black performers who had faced similar injustice. Others warned him to stay quiet, reminding him that Hollywood had a way of silencing those who spoke too loudly. Jimmie wrestled with the choice for weeks, unable to sleep, pacing through his home as the weight of that truth sank in.
Cheer him up a little.
Ma got some news that'll cheer everybody up.
For a brief moment, he considered hiring a lawyer and launching a public fight, but something stopped him. Those who knew him best said it wasn't fear, it was foresight. He understood the brutal cost of challenging an entire industry. He'd seen what happened to actors who rebelled, who called out studios, who tried to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Many were blacklisted, quietly erased from future opportunities, their careers ending overnight. Jimmie made his decision. He would protect his peace, even if it meant letting go of justice. Instead of fighting the system, he reinvented himself. He returned to stand-up comedy, focusing on the one space where no one could own him, the stage. On stage, he was still Jimmie Walker, not J.J. Evans. The jokes were his, the timing was his, the laughter was his, and in those moments, performing live before real people, he felt free again. But that decision didn't come without consequence. Keeping the secret weighed on him for years. He avoided interviews that dug too deep, turned down documentary offers, and sidestepped any talk of contracts or money. He wanted to move forward, not dwell on the past. Still, the emotional toll left scars. Behind the smile, Jimmie battled feelings of betrayal and regret. He'd worked harder than most, yet the rewards had been unevenly shared. It wasn't just about the money, it was about principle. He'd trusted the system, and the system had quietly taken more than it gave. The irony, however, was that this painful discovery may have saved him in a strange way. In the years that followed, several of his peers who did confront the industry publicly found themselves shut out, their careers fading faster than their stories could spread. Jimmie, on the other hand, remained active. He continued touring, appearing on late-night shows and building a new fan base that saw him not just as J.J. Evans, but as a living legend of comedy. His choice to stay silent, though controversial, preserved his place in Hollywood history. There were still moments of darkness. Insiders recalled that even decades later, Jimmie kept those documents locked in a private safe, a reminder of both what he'd achieved and what had been taken. When asked about his time on Good Times, he always chose his words carefully, speaking fondly of the experience but never delving into the deeper truths. Rumors about the document continued to swirl. Some claimed it included evidence of financial mismanagement. Others speculated it contained a personal letter from a network executive admitting wrongdoing. The truth to this day remains uncertain. Jimmie never confirmed or denied the specifics. What's clear is that whatever he found was powerful enough to change the course of his life.
Cheer him up a little.
Ma got some news that'll cheer everybody up.
In time, Jimmie came to see the episode not as a tragedy, but as a lesson. He began mentoring younger comedians, urging them to read every line of their contracts, to hire honest representation, to understand that talent alone isn't enough in show business. He told them, "Know your worth before someone else defines it for you." As years passed, his legacy grew quieter but stronger. He may not have reached the same financial heights as other television legends, but he achieved something far more enduring: respect. His story became one of survival, resilience, and quiet wisdom. But integrity doesn't. Still, one question lingers. What exactly did that document reveal, and why did he protect it for so long? Some say he planned to release it in his memoirs. Others believe he destroyed it to close that painful chapter forever. Only Jimmie Walker truly knows. And perhaps that's the final secret. Not the document itself, but the choice to keep it hidden. Because sometimes, the real power lies not in what we reveal, but in what we choose to guard. Do you think Jimmie Walker ever got the recognition and respect he truly deserved for his role in Good Times? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You'll love it.